1, 2, is this on?
The topic of dream matches is something wrestling fans love to discuss.
Quite frankly, a match I thought I would never, ever see.
But usually these conversations mostly center around what ifs, imagining matches we wish we could have seen happen. But what about the dream matches we were able to witness that flew under the radar, be it from the wrestlers working against one another early in their career, or due to the match not taking place on a big stage? Today, we're going to take a look at 10 dream matches that actually happened, which you might not have known about. Number 1, The Rock vs Ric Flair. The closing of WCW gave us a chance to finally see some of the dream matches between wrestlers who've previously worked for each of the rival promotions. The Rock vs Ric Flair would have definitely been on the list of clashes fans wanted to see, if nothing else but for their verbal battles on the mic.
To be the man, woo, you gotta beat. No, wait, that's not it. That's not it.
Their sole one-on-one encounter, however, took place on Raw in the summer of 2002. Although the match itself was nothing major, we should still be happy we got to see it, since it was one of The Rock's final singles matches before fully stepping away from WWE. While Flair had been wrestling sporadically at the time and was about to transition into more of a manager role, having previously been an authority figure. The Rock would pick up the win in what was a relatively short but decent match with an awesome finish that saw The Rock kip up and hit the rock bottom. We would see the two in the ring together again one more time at WrestleMania 20 when Evolution took on the Rock and Sock Connection in a handicap match. Number 2, Randy Orton vs Eddie Guerrero. Someone who also wrestled in that WrestleMania 20 match was Randy Orton, who had been making his ascent in the WWE at the time as the Legend Killer. Orton and Eddie Guerrero had been positioned as two of the biggest stars on the SmackDown brand at the time, so it was a big deal when they wrestled on TV in late 2005. This would be their only singles match ever against each other, and was one of Guerrero's final matches before his tragic death a month later. And it's perhaps this timing that makes this match more of a forgotten gem. The finish was also unmemorable as Cowboy Bob Orton pushed Eddie off the top rope before Latino Heat could hit the frog splash on Randy, and this gave Guerrero the DQ win. The Ortons then beat down Eddie after the match until Batista made the save. Teddy Long then came out and announced the main event for next week, which you guessed it, would be a
Tag team match
between Batista, Eddie, and the Ortons. Number 3, Mick Foley versus Chris Jericho. One thing that can be unique about wrestling is when we see two major stars who may have wrestled at the same time and for the same companies, but despite this, rarely faced off against each other in the ring. And this is the case for Mick Foley and Chris Jericho, both of whom were two of the most recognizable names of their era. So it's all the more surprising that they only had 2 televised matches against each other. The first went down in the middle of the 90s in one of Chris Jericho's first matches in ECW, as he wrestled against Foley, who was working as Cactus Jack, just before he joined the WWF. The two would have a nice back and forth encounter which spilled to the outside, featuring weapon shots and some big bumps. Jericho would score the upset win with a bridging German suplex. Foley would be on the next flight to Stamford, Connecticut, while Jericho would make the move to WCW shortly after. The two's next one-on-one encounter came once both were finally in the WWF together 3 years later in 1999, with Mick this time donning the Mankind gimmick. Jericho would come out on top once again, this time thanks to a roll-up. Foley never did manage to defeat Jericho, unless you count during Mick's Hall of Fame speech in 2013, where Foley managed to pin Y2J down for the 3 following an elbow, with CM Punk counting the fall.
I never beat Chris Jericho. I don't have any elbows left in me.
Number 4, Stone Cold vs Mr. Perfect. During his final WWF run in 2002, Perfect would return to much fanfare at that year's Royal Rumble, even making it to the final 4.
Here's one of the biggest in the lore of the WWF, Mr. Perfect.
But this would be as good as it got for Kurt Hennig, who quickly fell down the card. Hennig did however compete in a marquee match to main event Raw a month into his return against Stone Cold Steve Austin. Austin wouldn't take long to defeat Perfect in a match which Austin mostly controlled, gaining the win once he hit a routine Stone Cold Stunner. Perfect wouldn't feature in many more noteworthy matches following this as he continued to fall down the card, which was a massive shame given his legendary status, and even despite his injuries. It was clear he had more to give than WWF believed during this period. We could have been treated to a host of further dream matches involving Mr. Perfect and more of the roster, but sadly, it wasn't to be, and Hennig would pass away a little less than a year after his match with Austin. Number 5, AJ Styles vs CM Punk. Next up, we have one of the more higher profile matches on our list, or rather series of matches, but it still deserves mentioning since none of them took place in a major company. We're talking about the battles between AJ Styles and CM Punk that took the independent wrestling scene by storm in 2003 and 2004. The two would wrestle 7 key matches across various promotions, with some getting to see the light of day in video form, including their matches in ROH in 2002 and 2003. The first of which Styles won by countering a Shining Wizard attempt into a Styles Clash. AJ upped the ante even more in their second ROH match by winning with a top rope Styles Clash to become the first Ring of Honor Pure Champion. And Styles would have Punk's number again when they wrestled, this time outside of ROH, for the IWC promotion, winning after a Hurricane Rana was reversed into a powerbomb, which then transitioned into a Styles Clash for the 3. Punk would finally defeat AJ in a recorded match for IWA Mid-South, winning their heavyweight championship in the process, doing so via submission. AJ's and Punk's paths wouldn't cross again since each would work in different companies, something that still rings true to this day. And while it's unlikely we'll see a return bout between the two anytime soon, this is one clash that still remains a modern wrestling dream match. Number 6. Fergal Devitt vs Bryan Danielson. We'll take a look at another independent match that we surprisingly have never seen a rematch of, despite the two wrestlers previously having worked in the same company for a number of years. The match in question is Bryan Danielson vs Fergal Devitt that occurred for NWA Empire in 2007. The show itself was put together at short notice and thus was barely promoted, which explains the small crowd in attendance. Despite this, Danielson and Devitt put on a stellar technical match, which featured some funny moments and incredible wrestling. The finish, however, will have caught fans by surprise, as Danielson got the 3 count off the back of a superplex rather than a more traditional finishing move or submission hold. The match went so well that fans will have surely figured a rematch was on the cards, but to this day we've never seen one, not in Japan, on the independent scene, or in the WWE. And even though both wrestlers work in different companies today, this is one match that it's possible we could see again, given the frequent jumps we see from WWE wrestlers to AEW. Number 7. Kurt Angle vs Lance Storm. When you think of two superstars who could put on a wrestling clinic together, Kurt Angle and Lance Storm spring to mind. Their only ever singles match would occur on SmackDown in 2001, but with so much of the weekly shows being invested into the Invasion storyline at the time, this meant the in-ring action often took a back seat. And this would be the case here, as Angle and Storm were limited to a quick 5.5 minute TV match. Better than nothing, but still a crime given how great of a match the two could have potentially had. Angle would claim victory after an angle slam and then an ankle lock, which got the win via submission, as we were fast on our way to seeing Kurt develop into a more straight shooting wrestling machine, while Storm was continuing to establish himself as a solid mid-carder in the WWF. Any opportunity for these two to wrestle again became limited, due to Storm later being used as a tag team wrestler, as well as the introduction of the brand split, which kept both wrestlers on separate shows. Number 8. Kurt Angle vs Owen Hart. Angle would feature in another dream match that took place earlier in his career, so early that Kurt hadn't even debuted on WWF TV yet. Angle battled Owen Hart in a dark match before a Shotgun Saturday Night taping. Kurt was still yet to don his traditional wrestling look with the singlet, instead opting for plain black wrestling trunks and boots, although he was sure to still wear his Olympic gold medal. Owen was able to win the match after hitting a side belly to belly and spinning heel kick. The match was no doubt a great learning experience for Angle, who would debut on television in the WWF 6 months later. Owen was said to be impressed with Kurt's performance in the bout and believed he would be a future world champion. Angle was also pleased with the match and was very grateful for how good Hart made him look. No footage currently exists of the match, although it is highly likely that WWE still have a copy of it in the archives. Sadly, we would never see a rematch between the two due to Owen Hart's accidental death that took place at the Over the Edge pay-per-view just 13 days after the dark match with Angle. Number 9. Chris Benoit vs Randy Savage. We have an example of something that certainly wasn't a dream match at the time, but definitely would have been just a couple of years later. The match was Chris Benoit vs Randy Savage from WCW Monday Nitro in early 1996. Savage put up the WCW Championship in a competitive match, defeating Benoit only by disqualification in their most high-profile match together. They would wrestle a few more times on WCW Saturday Night, with each bout ending in a DQ. The two men would never wrestle one-on-one again after 1996. Savage would only wrestle once following his departure from WCW in 2000, while for Benoit, 2000 would be his most successful year in wrestling to that point, and the Crippler would only build upon this with each passing year. And by 2004, it was the ideal time for Chris and the Macho Man to have a rematch, as Benoit would hold the same big gold belt that Savage defended against him 8 years previous. But unfortunately, Savage's days in the ring were over. Number 10. Hulk Hogan vs Dusty Rhodes. Our final match involves two of the biggest icons in the history of the industry going up against each other, albeit at different points in their career, as Hulk Hogan faced Dusty Rhodes in Japan at the start of the 1980s. Dusty was still in his prime at the time, while Hogan was just 3 years in the business when he wrestled the American Dream. Rhodes eventually became busted open, with the match becoming so physical that the referee would be shoved out of the way by Hogan, leading to a DQ win for the Dream. The slugfest continued after the match, until the heel Hogan eventually got out of dodge. The two would wrestle once more 6 months later, also in Japan, although this match was not filmed. Dusty came out the victor again, this time due to a countout. The two legends would never lock up in a singles match again, as by the time both men were working in the WWF in the late 80s, they did so whilst wrestling as babyfaces, meaning the chances of them squaring off in the ring were slim. And this means their meetings in Japan are the only matches they ever had together. And that brings us to the end of this video. As always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.